I stood in my sister Fiona's kitchen on Thanksgiving Day, clutching a plate of roast turkey sage stuffing and potatoes. I had helped peel that morning from where I stood. I could see the dining room glowing like something out of a lifestyle magazine. The table was set with hand-embroidered Irish linen, Wedgwood china, and tall crystal glasses that sparkled beneath a chandelier imported from Paris. The chairs had velvet cushions. The wine was decanted. Every detail was deliberate except for one. There was no place setting for me. "The dining room is for accomplished people," Fiona said, her voice as smooth as her foundation. She adjusted her Cartier bracelet and didn't bother to whisper, "You can eat in the kitchen. It suits your lifestyle." I glanced at the kitchen island where a single plate sat alone on cold marble. No placemat, no chair pulled out, no glass of wine. Just a quiet corner where the unimpressive were meant to disappear. Through the archway, I saw my parents already seated at the table, pretending not to notice. My mother sipped champagne. My father laughed a little too hard at Rupert's story about billing clients. Rupert, Fiona's husband, junior partner at a firm that handled hedge funds, was pouring vintage Bordeaux for everyone except me. "Don't take it personally, Clara," he said, smirking. "We just have to maintain the vibe." I smiled thinly, gripping the edge of the counter to stop my hand from shaking. They thought I was the family eccentric. The one with the vague job, the used Honda, the flat in a developing part of town. The one who couldn't hold on to a man or a corporate title. What they didn't know was that both Fiona and Rupert worked in a building I owned. The same building they were bragging about again over dinner. But I said nothing. I sat at the kitchen island, lifted my fork, and tasted the turkey. It was dry, but the irony perfectly cooked. Rupert raised his glass and said something loud and smug about how lucky he was to land a corner office in one of the most iconic buildings in London. Fiona beamed, mentioning for the third time how impressed her clients were with the location. "The Kingsway building just has that prestige, doesn't it?" she said. Glancing around for approval, I smiled into my mashed potatoes. If only they knew that I was the one who had selected the marble floors in that lobby, that the brass elevator fixtures Fiona gushed about had been chosen by me, that every month their firms wired rent payments to a company named Holloway Properties Ltd., never suspecting who stood behind the name. Let me back up 5 years ago. I was working as a commercial property analyst at a mid-size investment firm. It wasn't glamorous, but I'd always had an eye for patterns. While my colleagues were obsessing over tech stocks, I saw something different. London's aging office blocks in prime locations were about to become gold mines. I just needed the nerve and every penny I had to prove it. They called me foolish for quitting. Now they eat lunch in my lobby. Back then I had a decent job, stable, predictable, forgettable. I was a commercial property analyst at a mid-tier investment firm in the city, surrounded by men in expensive suits who thought I was too quiet to be clever. I spent my days poring over market data, lease trends, zoning changes, numbers. No one else bothered to study deeply. But I noticed something: tech companies were moving into central London fast. And they didn't want glass skyscrapers. They wanted character history space that felt different. The only problem: most of those older buildings were crumbling. Outdated plumbing, inefficient layouts, zero curb appeal. I saw an opportunity while everyone else was chasing luxury high-rises. I started mapping out potential gold mines. Neglected buildings in prime locations. I ran numbers late at night in my studio flat. Building models on my secondhand laptop. Running stress tests for loans I didn't yet have. I scraped together every pound I could, cashed out my pension early, drained my savings, and pulled out of a down payment fund I'd started for a future I no longer wanted. Then I quit. When I told my parents, they blinked at me like I'd announced I was moving to Mars, another one of Clara's little dreams. Mum sighed at Sunday lunch, cutting her roast beef with quiet disapproval. "Not everyone's built for corporate success," Fiona added, smiling thinly. "Some of us just need structure." They didn't ask what I was planning. They didn't want to know I formed Holloway Properties Ltd. a month later. Just me, a few angel investors. I pitched in tiny cafes and one very ambitious spreadsheet. The office was a cupboard-sized room above a hair salon in Soho. The printer jammed constantly, the heater rattled. I brought my own kettle. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. I found the Kingsway building by accident, half hidden behind scaffolding on a street most people rushed past without looking. It was an old Art Deco structure with cracked windows, faded stonework, and a rusted sign hanging by one chain. Most saw a liability. I saw a crown buried in soot. The owners had inherited it and wanted out. They couldn't see past the peeling paint and asbestos reports I could. The bones were solid. The location just 3 blocks from Covent Garden was gold. I negotiated hard, leveraging every contact and investor I had. The final price, $8 million. It felt impossible. It felt perfect. I remember signing the papers in a drafty solicitor's office, my hand shaking slightly as I wrote Clara Walker on the final line. Just like that, I owned a building no one believed in. The renovation took 9 months. I lived on builder's tea and protein bars, spending every waking hour on site. I hired a local architect who respected the original details. We kept the terrazzo floors, restored the brass railings, and replaced every window with custom replicas of the originals. The lifts were gutted and rebuilt with soft closed doors and silent motors. I chose the marble myself, Italian, not too glossy, with subtle veining that caught the light. Every night I went home with dust in my hair and paint under my nails. Every morning I showed up in work boots and a clipboard, answering to no one but the dream I refused to let go of. Before we even finished, interest started rolling in tech startups, boutique consultancies. And then came the unexpected one, Harrington and Blythe, a law firm looking to move offices. Rupert's firm, I didn't flinch. Shortly after, Rowan and Fiona's accounting firm scheduled a tour. They wanted something central, polished, prestigious. My building ticked every box. They signed 10-year leases without ever knowing who they were signing with. As far as they were concerned, the landlord was Holloway Properties Ltd., a faceless entity behind polished emails. They never asked who owned the name, and I never offered. I'll never forget the day Fiona announced over Sunday roast that her firm had secured new office space. She waved her wine glass like a trophy. "We're moving to the Kingsway building," she said. Practically glowing, it's incredibly exclusive. Clients will be impressed the moment they step in. I had to excuse myself to the loo, so I wouldn't laugh. She went on and on about the finishes, the location, the fresh energy of the place, as if she'd discovered some hidden gem. I nodded politely, offering non-committal hums while chewing my Yorkshire pudding. A month later, Rupert bragged about his new corner office. "The views are exceptional," he said, refilling his plate. "And the landlord seems to know what they're doing. Place runs like clockwork." I sipped my water and smiled. I knew exactly how the place ran. I'd built the systems, I'd selected the security contractor, I'd even chosen the scent diffusers in the lifts. Cedarwood and bergamot. They'd signed 10-year leases. They moved in, they bragged. And I said nothing to them. I was still the odd sister. The one with vague ambitions and a secondhand handbag. The one who never quite fit. But they were tenants in my building, and every month, like clockwork, their firms wired rent straight into my account. After the Kingsway building, things moved quickly. I reinvested every pound that came in. No holidays, no splurges, no designer handbags to post online. Just quiet deals, smart renovations, and buildings that people had given up on. Over the next 4 years, I acquired 6 more properties, each one in a location others thought was past its prime, or too quirky for corporate use. I saw something else. One by one, I brought them back to life. Updated wiring, modern HVAC systems, rooftop gardens, bike storage, artisan cafes in the lobbies. The tenants came without much coaxing. My occupancy rate never dipped below 97%. Startups, law firms, media companies, they all wanted in. No one ever asked who was behind Holloway Properties. That suited me perfectly. My net worth quietly crossed 80 million, then 120 million last year. I cleared 150 millions. I had enough to retire 5 times over, but I didn't. Not because I needed the money, because I loved the work, the strategy, the precision, the satisfaction of proving everyone wrong without ever saying a word. And still my family thought I was barely scraping by. I kept driving my old Vauxhall. I wore high street clothes and used a phone with a cracked screen. When asked what I did, I said I'm in property. They never asked for details. At Christmas, my mother gave me a career coaching book. Fiona offered to connect me with someone at her firm, just in case you're ready for something stable. Rupert asked if I'd ever thought of getting a real estate license. I smiled through all of it because they didn't know. I owned the buildings where they held their strategy, meetings took their conference calls, and hosted their annual parties. They didn't know they were just another line item in my portfolio. And I had no intention of telling them. Not yet. I sat at the kitchen island picking at my plate as the voices from the dining room floated in. Fiona gushing about her firm's impressive new clients. Rupert going on about his strategic legal negotiations. Champagne glasses clinked. Laughter spilled into the kitchen like oil on silk. Honestly, the Kingsway building changed everything for us, Fiona said. The clients treat us differently now. It's all about perception. I've got the corner office on the top floor, Rupert added. The view's incredible. It just feels powerful. My fork hovered over a piece of turkey as I listened. They didn't know I'd stood on the roof of that building at sunrise the morning after the renovation finished. That I'd chosen the exact tint of the glass that made that view so spectacular. That their power was something I had built brick by brick, line by line, deal by deal. My phone buzzed quietly beside my plate. A text from Nathan, my property manager. Inspection complete on Kingsway. Rowan and Finn's floors have multiple fire code violations. Harrington and Blythe's unit has unpermitted alterations. Proceed with lease termination notices. I reread the message slowly, then typed back, hold off until Monday. Let them enjoy their Thanksgiving. Clara, my mother, called out from the dining room. Since you're already in the kitchen, would you be a dear and bring us another bottle of wine? I walked to the wine fridge and pulled out their precious bottle, something imported and overpriced. Behind me, Fiona whispered to Rupert, loud enough for me to hear. At least she's good for something. Someone has to serve. I said nothing. The lease termination papers were already printed, already signed, sitting neatly on my desk in an envelope embossed with the Holloway Properties letterhead. They'd see it soon enough. For now, I handed them the wine. Here you go, I said sweetly. How do you like the new lifts in your building? Fiona didn't even look up as she poured herself another glass. They've really upgraded the place since we moved in. I mean, the marble and the lifts alone must have cost a fortune. I smiled, remembering how I'd personally signed off on the stone Calicata Oro imported from Italy. It had cost more than Fiona's annual salary. Too bad Clara's building doesn't have anything that fancy, she added with a laugh. Do you even have a lift in that sad little flat of yours? Rupert chuckled. She probably shows basement flats to students, still thinks that's property work. I took a sip of my water and said nothing. My phone buzzed again, another message from Nathan. Preston Tower acquisition complete, closure finalized. Congratulations, Miss Walker. I glanced down at my screen, feeling the tiniest spark of satisfaction. The Preston Tower, the gleaming glass landmark every firm wanted a piece of, was now mine. Purchased the day before for $38 million in a sealed off-market deal. The announcement wouldn't be public for another week. Back at the table, Rupert wiped his mouth with a linen napkin. Holloway Properties, he said, puffing out his chest. Now that's a serious real estate firm. Not like some people's little hobby jobs. I nearly laughed out loud. They had no idea, and I wasn't about to spoil the surprise. Not yet. The morning after Thanksgiving, I arrived at my real office, the entire top floor of the Kingsway building. The space was calm, flooded with light and silent, except for the low hum of the city below. My desk was clear, except for 2 crisp, cream-colored envelopes. Each bore the gold-lettered seal of Holloway Properties Lehigh, and inside were carefully prepared lease termination notices, one for Rowan and Finn, one for Harrington and Blythe. Both signed by me, Clara Walker, director and sole owner. At 9:00 a.m. sharp, my assistant buzzed in. Couriers waiting for the delivery, send them, I said, watching the seconds tick by on the corner of my screen. This wasn't revenge, it was timing. I pulled up the building's live security feed. Camera 3, Fiona's office. She was seated at her glass desk, tapping through emails with her usual efficiency, unaware. Camera 6, Rupert's corner suite. He was pacing with a coffee clearly in the middle of a self-important phone call. At 9:31 a.m., the courier arrived. Fiona opened her envelope first, her smile faltered lips pressing together as her eyes scanned the pages, then her back straightened. She read it again, slower. I watched the blood drain from her face. Moments later, she was on the phone, probably calling Rupert on camera 6. He picked up, nodded, and then tore into his own envelope. His reaction was louder, messier. He shouted at someone outside his office, knocked over a pen holder, then started rifling through a drawer like he might find an escape clause buried somewhere under his ego. My phone lit up with calls. Fiona, Rupert, Mum, Dad. I let them all go to voicemail. Then I dialed my mother. She answered on the first ring. Clara, thank goodness something awful has happened. Fiona and Rupert just got eviction notices, I said calmly. Yes, they need your help. I let the silence stretch. Interesting, I murmured. Last week I wasn't even invited to the table. Now I'm suddenly useful. She didn't answer. Tell them to come to the top floor of their building. Noon sharp, the owner will meet them. The top floor. But that's... Yes, I said and hung up. Then I turned back to the screens. Showtime. At exactly 11:55 a.m., my security team buzzed in. Your guests have arrived. I turned to the monitor and saw them, Fiona, in a tight navy dress, arms crossed. Rupert fidgeting with his cufflinks. Mum and Dad standing stiffly beside them, clearly confused and deeply uncomfortable. None of them had ever been invited to the executive floor before I'd made sure of that. Today the lift that normally required a private key card had been reprogrammed for one ride only. Send them up, I said. At noon, the elevator doors opened directly into my office suite. My assistant greeted them with a polite smile and stepped aside. Ms. Walker will see you now. Walker, my mother repeated, frowning. We're here to see the owner of Holloway Properties. The doors to my office opened. I was already standing behind my desk, hands folded, sunlight pouring in behind me from the floor-to-ceiling windows. They stopped short, blinking into the light. Clara Fiona's voice cracked. What is this, please? I said, gesturing to the sleek armchairs arranged before me. Have a seat. Rupert stared at the furnishings, like he'd just realized they weren't from a showroom, but custom-made. This is the owner's suite. I smiled. It is mine. Silence. I founded Holloway Properties 5 years ago. The Kingsway building was my first. Since then, I've acquired 7 more, including Preston Tower. I pressed a button behind me, a wall, transformed into a digital map. Pins lit up across London. Each one marked a building I owned. Their buildings. Fiona paled. My father reached for the back of a chair like he needed something to hold on to. My mother sank down slowly, as if the weight of her own ignorance had finally caught up with her. You've been my tenants this entire time, I said evenly. And now, due to multiple lease violations, both of your firms are facing termination. You can't, Fiona whispered. You're our sister. Sister, I raised an eyebrow. Where was that sisterly bond last night, when I was clearing plates while you toasted yourselves? My mother tried again. Clara, love, we didn't know. No, I said softly. You never asked. And now the truth was louder than any apology they could muster. I let the silence stretch a little longer. Let them sit with it, the weight of every assumption they'd ever made about me crumbling quietly at their feet. I'm not terminating your leases, I said finally. They all exhaled at once, a collective sigh of relief. But I continued, effective immediately. Your rents are tripling. Rupert choked. Tripling. That's well within the rights outlined in your contracts, I finished for him. Especially following code violations. Fiona's mouth opened, then closed again. We can't afford that. Not for our floors. I know, I said calmly. Which is why I'm moving your firms to lower levels. The corner offices, I need those for tenants who respect the spaces they're given and the people behind them. Rupert's face turned red. You're punishing us. I'm setting boundaries, I replied. Something I should have done a long time ago. Tears welled in Fiona's eyes. Please, Clara, we'll lose everything. You didn't seem worried about that when I was eating alone in your kitchen, my father finally spoke. This is cruel. No, I said, rising from my chair. Cruelty is measured in neglect, not contracts. I handed them each a revised lease. You have until end of day to decide triple rent, smaller offices, or find new space. I smiled, though I should mention I own most of those too. They left my office in silence, the kind that follows defeat. On the monitors, I watched them step into the lift. Heads bowed, no more bravado, no more smirks. Fiona's shoulders sagged beneath her tailored coat. Rupert looked like he'd swallowed a nail. My parents followed behind, stunned into silence. I leaned back in my chair, letting it all settle, the years of being dismissed, ignored. Looked down on the kitchen island. The offhand comments, the absence of a chair at the table. My phone buzzed again. A message from Nathan, new premium tenant confirmed. Interested in both corner suites. Ready to move in next week, I smiled. Schedule the tour, they're available immediately. Sometimes success isn't about revenge. It's about the elegance of letting the truth arrive, dressed in silence that evening. I returned to my penthouse apartment, a 2-story sanctuary of glass and warmth overlooking the Thames. No one had ever been invited up here. It was mine, built with every moment they thought I was failing. On the marble coffee table sat a cream envelope, thick and formal. Walker Family Thanksgiving, next year, hosted by Clara Walker. Inside were place cards. Fiona Harrington, see at 12, adjacent to kitchen service. Rupert Harrington, see at 13, clearing duty after dinner. Mum and Dad, seats 10 and 11, no speaking roles unless addressed. And at the head of the table, Clara Walker, host-owner and the one who no longer eats in kitchens. Some lessons are best served on linen.